Tylenol, whose active ingredient is acetaminophen, is a widely used pain reliever, including by pregnant women. Some previous studies have indicated risks to fetal development, but others have found no association. The American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists says it is safe to use in pregnancy, though it recommends that pregnant women consult with their doctors before using it, as with all medicines. So I'm just seeing this now. Let me say before you comment that my memory of the timeline here is that aspirin, which is the oldest pain reliever that has been used in pill form in the U.S. Obviously, opioids are also an ancient form coming from poppies. Aspirin from willow bark. Aspirin has been used for a very long time as a pain reliever and anti-inflammatory, right?
Yep.
And it was discovered in, I want to say the 70s or 80s. To cause something known as Ray's syndrome in children when their mothers took it during pregnancy. And so although Tylenol had been on the market for a long time, it was at that moment, whenever that was, I want to say sometime in the 80s, that women were now advised strongly against taking any aspirin at all during pregnancy or giving it to children under, I don't remember, the age of 12 or something. Yep. And the recommended substitute was Tylenol. And of course, and there's a lot to be said here, as we have said elsewhere on DarkHorse at other times, about the wisdom, or really lack thereof, of looking to obscure pain with drugs at all, really, under most circumstances, but especially when you have a fetus inside of you. It's just, it's not wise to be trying to mask pain when you are pregnant. You should be trying to figure out what the causes of the pain are and get rid of them such that the symptom of the causes of the pain disappears.
Yes, when you are pregnant, you are whatever series of nested complex systems you ordinarily are, plus another equally complex nested series of complex systems now interacting with a developmental pathway that has all sorts of sensitivities to it. So, if there's a moment in time to be maximally careful about any sort of intervention that has potentially harmful consequences, pregnancy would be it.
And we know this. So people are going to object, like, oh, how dare you tell women not to, self-medicate? Like, well, we already know that alcohol during pregnancy is not good for you, that raw cheese during pregnancy poses a risk, that being exposed to, cat poop during pregnancy has a particular risk. And these aren't things, eating goat cheese at other times is not considered to be a particularly risky exercise, nor is having a few glasses of wine, but you shouldn't be doing those things during pregnancy. And you also should not be self-medicating for relatively trivial things during pregnancy.
Well, I guess I wonder, I would love to see an analysis that actually categorized these risks with the same scheme, right?
Yes.
How risky is goat cheese? How risky is Tylenol? That would be an interesting comparison. But let me just say, I have an overarching point for this story. The overarching point, I want to drill down on what women used to be told about Tylenol during pregnancy. I think the least interesting way to think about this story is, now we know something that we didn't know, right? That's true. That's going to happen all the time. But if you now look back at the advice that women were given, the advice is unforgivable, right? Women were told, this is the safe way to deal with your pain. Mm-hmm. When the point is, if we now know that that's not true, it wasn't safe then either. Even if the harms weren't known, the point is, when you say something's safe, you are not saying it was without harm. You're saying it is without risk. We learned this during COVID. You can't have a safe and effective vaccine if you don't know what it does to somebody 5 years after they take it. Safe means there's no risk. When women were told that Tylenol was comparatively safe, that was not true. We are now going to find that out if this report on what Kennedy is going to release is accurate. But I also want to connect this because we have, interestingly, over the history of DarkHorse live streams, we have covered aspirin. Mm-hmm. We have covered aspirin in the context of the role that it played in the 1918 flu epidemic, in which we all think that a terrible flu virus killed a huge number of people. The actual story is that there were two things that mean that we are in no danger of such a flu outbreak in 2025. The two things are, one, Most of the people who died from flu in 1918 died from a bacterial secondary infection, a pneumonia that is now treatable with antibiotics. And the second thing is aspirin had just been, I think, discovered, but it was just brought into medical use. It was the new wonder drug, and it was being prescribed to people in doses that we now understand to be lethal. And this caused healthy young people basically to drown in their own fluids, which was incredibly terrifying. You had people who had the flu suddenly dead, robust people, and the answer is actually that was iatrogenic harm in many cases. They were given way too much aspirin. So we've covered aspirin there. With Tylenol, we've covered the fact that Tylenol is actually an incredibly toxic substance. So toxic that initially it wasn't allowed to be used as a medication. Ultimately, it broke through and became marketed, but it remains very dangerous, especially in combination with alcohol, which most of the public does not understand is a health risk. And we've also covered the question of folic acid, which is being enriched into flour.
Yep.
We covered
into
the story,
corn in particular with tortillas.
We covered the story where in a bizarre attempt to protect Hispanic women, it was being introduced in tortillas. And it turns out research you dug up suggests that this is in no way safe and actually quite hazardous. So it's interesting that we've covered these topics, which seem to be brought together in this story before, and now we're revisiting them. But again, the overarching point is, what do you do when they tell you something is safe, implying that there is no risk, and then they revise that decades later? And the answer is, how am I to take your advice in the present if I know that you don't have a problem conflating the I don't know of a harm with this is safe, right? Again, I'll use the example that I use in general. If I say I drove home drunk last night and there was no incident, was it safe? Because there was no harm, right? Well, obviously it wasn't safe. Nobody would say it's safe. You know, if I pick up a gun and I put it to my head and press the trigger and it goes click, there was no harm. Was it safe? No. Ridiculously unsafe. So we all know this intuitively. Safe means there's no risk. When women have been pregnant and told, oh, yeah, don't use aspirin, use Tylenol, it's safe. And then the answer is decades later, you find out you were exposing your child to a risk of autism that, you know, if you have any sense about you at all, you wouldn't have done. So you were lied to.
There's something too here about expectations and advertising and the marketplace, where I think, I don't remember at the point that aspirin started, that the Ray's syndrome connection to aspirin during pregnancy became known, and now Tylenol was being recommended. Were the other NSAIDs on the market yet? Like, was Advil and ibuprofen? I think they were made. I don't know. I don't remember this.
My sense is the other NSAIDs were not on the market yet. It was a long time ago that concern about Ray's syndrome, which I also wonder about too.
Fine.
Yeah.
But I think it was close in time, but maybe they weren't on the market yet. But when you... I think all humans, but especially I think Americans, have this broken psychology where we think we deserve to have a thing if we already have it. And so if pregnant women have been allowed to take aspirin during pregnancy because no one has discovered that that's a problem, and now there's a discovery that that's a problem, instead of being able to say to the world, and to pregnant women in particular, actually, you can't do the thing that we've been telling you it was okay to do before. Especially I think in the United States, but maybe across the world, the market fills that empty niche with, oh, but don't worry, we got something for you. And so, Tylenol was already on the market, so it was very easy to say, well, of course, there's this other thing you can do. And, you were taking aspirin, now you can just take Tylenol. And yes, I'm sure. And I have not dug up the whatever was being actually said to women at the time, but it needs to be acceptable to say, you know what? The thing that we told you was safe isn't. And we don't have an alternative for you. We just don't. Maybe we're looking for one. Maybe there is none. Maybe we're looking for one and we'll find one. Maybe we do have this other thing, which we weren't recommending because we have these concerns. So we're going to need to dig a little deeper before we start recommending that, but know that that's a possibility. But maybe actually the thing that you were treating, the problem that you were solving with this intervention, isn't solvable with that kind of intervention. That is actually a possibility. And it's something that I think, again, especially Americans, just aren't prepared. Like, we're just not grown-ups. We're not prepared to say, well, I guess I'm going to need to solve the problem another way.
Yeah.
We expect the market to come in and give us stuff to buy to solve our problems for us.
Well, and we've created a situation that is, it's, again, pharma's wet dream. Because the basic point is, if you're going to say, I'm allowed to tell you something is safe because we don't know of a harm, well, that is going to create a strong bias in favor of new drugs. Because it takes time for these harms to emerge, especially if pharma is, hiding the ball. So the basic point is going to be, whatever we're going to admit now was harmful. Oh, we've got this other one. It's safe. What do you mean safe? I think what you mean is it's new and we don't know what the harms are. It's going to take some decades, by which point your child may have been turned autistic and, you'll be suffering whatever consequences.
Actually, often what they mean is, let's use the aspirin, Tylenol, Ray's syndrome example. Well, Tylenol doesn't cause Ray's syndrome. Like, that's it. That's what you know. The thing that has just been taken off the market or stopped being recommended because it has a known harm, a singular known harm, which is not trivial, but it is a singular known harm. Well, we know that this doesn't cause that. That is insufficient. That is wildly insufficient, because no one before that moment in the 70s or 80s really had ever heard of Ray's syndrome. Like, that wasn't what people were concerned about. They're concerned about the health of their babies and the health of the mothers. And, there's one condition which you really don't want to create. But guess what? That's not the only risk. It can't be the only risk.
Well, and given the tendency to lie in order to get drugs or other treatments to the public, right? A tendency that exists, we can now see inside the public health apparatus, inside medical schools. We see it inside pharma. Given that tendency, you have to look back at a story. I'm not saying that aspirin doesn't cause Ray's syndrome in kids. Mm-hmm. Maybe it does. But I can equally well imagine a story in which the folks who had their new fancy patented drug didn't want people going to this thing that had been, around for a century and using that because, it has a known risk profile. So it could be. Well,
Tylenol had been around for a long time at that point. Tylenol wasn't brand new on the market.
Well, I agree with you.
I'm not saying there wasn't market drive towards encouraging Tylenol, but it wasn't a brand new, shiny new drug.
Yeah, I agree. It wasn't that campaign. But what I want to know is that something that is objective actually studied this question and came to that conclusion, because you could easily imagine it being a marketing gimmick, because clearly people behave this way.